I'm sitting in the passenger seat of a Range Rover in British racing green, my hands shaking so badly I can barely hold the phone. The text message is still there, glowing on the screen like it might disappear if I look away. Your mom still doesn't know we got $840K for the beach house. Closing was last month. She actually asked when the wedding was. 3 laughing emojis. My daughter-in-law's laugh, frozen in pixels, mocking me. The lawyer beside me, Patricia, is asking if I'm okay. I can't answer. My throat has closed up, and my chest feels like someone's sitting on it. We're parked outside my son's house, the house I helped him buy 15 years ago when he couldn't quite make the down payment. The house where I've spent every Sunday for the past decade, smiling through dinners where they treated me like I was losing my mind. But let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here. How a woman who raised 3 children and ran a household for 50 years ended up being robbed by her own family. How I let it happen. How I almost lost everything. 6 months ago, I was still living in my apartment above a closed storefront on a busy street in Atlanta. Not where I wanted to be, not where I'd planned to end up at 75. But it was mine, or at least I thought it was. Spring had just started, that time when the windows finally open and life starts to feel possible again. I remember standing at my window in my lavender nightgown, the one I've had for 20 years, watching the morning light hit the old churches and tree-lined streets of my historic neighborhood. I was holding my plastic pill organizer with the days of the week, trying to remember if I'd taken Tuesday's medications or if that was yesterday. These moments scared me, these little blanks in my memory. My daughter-in-law had been pointing them out more and more. Mom, you already told us that story. Mom, we talked about this last week, remember? Mom, are you sure you should be living alone? Each time she said it, her voice dripped with this honeyed concern that made me feel guilty for questioning her. She'd tilt her head just so, reach across the table to pat my hand like I was a confused child. And I'd feel it, that hot flush of embarrassment creeping up my neck, that sinking sensation of being exposed as incompetent in front of everyone. My son would exchange glances with her, these quick, loaded looks that said, "See, I told you." And I'd apologize. I'd actually apologize for my own memory, for taking up space, for being a burden they had to manage. The worst part was how subtle it was, how reasonable they made it sound. They never yelled or got frustrated outwardly. It was always this patient, concerned performance. "We just love you so much, Mom. We just want to make sure you're safe." Safe. That word became a weapon they used to cut away my independence piece by piece. I'd started believing her, started thinking maybe I really was losing it. The apartment was quiet except for the street noise below. I kept the refrigerator stocked with sweet tea in a plastic pitcher, the way I always had, even though nobody visited anymore. They were all too busy. My son with his work, my daughter-in-law with her yoga classes and lunch dates, my grandchildren with their lives that didn't include an old woman who repeated herself. I spent my days quilting blankets for each grandchild, though I wondered sometimes if they even wanted them. The quilts I'd made for their parents were probably in storage somewhere, replaced by designer throws from boutiques I couldn't afford. But quilting kept my hands busy, kept my mind from wandering to places I didn't want it to go. I remember finishing a quilt for my oldest granddaughter's 16th birthday. I'd spent 3 months on it, choosing fabrics in her favorite colors, deep purples and silver grays. Each square had a different pattern, intricate work that made my fingers ache by evening. When I gave it to her at her birthday party, she'd opened it, said, "Thanks, Grandma," and set it aside to open other gifts. Designer handbags, gift cards to stores I'd never heard of, a new phone that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Later, I found the quilt folded carelessly on a chair in my son's guest room. My daughter-in-law saw me looking at it and said, with that sympathetic smile I'd come to dread, "Oh, you know teenagers, Mom. They don't really appreciate handmade things anymore. It's sweet that you try, though." Sweet. Like I was a child playing at being useful. Like the hours I'd poured into that quilt, the love stitched into every seam, was just a quaint hobby to humor the old lady with. Like the beach house. I hadn't been to the beach house in almost a year. My son said it was too much for me to manage, too far to drive at my age. He'd taken over handling everything there, he said, making sure the property taxes were paid, that the lawn service came, that everything was maintained. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. That morning, I'd gotten dressed and driven to the old church where I've gone since my baptism. The same church where my husband and I got married, where we buried him 3 years ago. I sat in the back pew after everyone had left, my fingers wrapped around the cross necklace I've worn since I was 12 years old. The silence in that church always felt holy to me, like God was listening even when no one else would. The stained glass windows threw colored light across the wooden pews, painting everything in shades of ruby and sapphire and gold. I used to find comfort in that light, used to feel like it was God showing me beauty even in dark places. But that morning, it just made me feel small, like I was sitting in someone else's cathedral, someone worthy of all that glory, while I was just an old woman who couldn't remember whether she'd taken her pills or not. The pastor had already left, but the church secretary, Mrs. Chen, was tidying up the prayer request cards in the vestibule. She'd seen me sitting there and brought me a cup of lukewarm coffee in a styrofoam cup, the kind they keep on a hot plate in the church office. She didn't say anything, just set it down next to me and squeezed my shoulder. That small kindness almost broke me. I sat there crying into that terrible coffee, and she didn't tell me I was being dramatic, didn't suggest I needed help managing my emotions. Just let me cry. I prayed that morning, asked God to help me understand why I felt so lost, so disconnected from my own life. Asked him to forgive me for whatever I'd done to make my family treat me this way. Because surely it was my fault. Surely I'd done something to deserve the eye rolls, the impatient sighs, the way they talked around me instead of to me. You're probably thinking I should have known something was wrong. You're probably thinking a woman doesn't just hand over her life without noticing. But that's the thing about gaslighting. It happens so slowly, you don't even feel the ground shifting under your feet until you're already falling. It started small. My daughter-in-law mentioning that I'd left the stove on. Had I? I couldn't remember. Then it was forgetting conversations we'd supposedly had, missing appointments I'd supposedly made, signing papers I didn't recall signing, though my son assured me I had, that we'd discussed it, that I just didn't remember. "Mom, we talked about this," became his favorite phrase, said with such certainty, such patient concern, that I started doubting my own memory, started keeping notes to myself, little reminders of what was real and what wasn't. But even those started to feel unreliable when my daughter-in-law would find them and say, gently, "Oh, Mom, that's not quite how it happened." They were so good at it, so careful, always framing their concerns as love, as worry, as wanting what was best for me. My daughter-in-law would put her hand on mine and say things like, "We just want you to be safe, Mom. We just want to take care of you." And I wanted to be taken care of. God help me. After my husband died, I wanted someone to tell me I didn't have to make every decision alone anymore. I wanted to believe that getting old meant I could finally rest. Let someone else handle the hard things. I wanted to not be a burden. So when they suggested I sign power of attorney over to my son, just for taxes and financial stuff I didn't understand anyway, I did it. My grandson drove me to the lawyer's office, held my hand in the waiting room, told me how responsible I was being to get my affairs in order. The lawyer asked if I understood what I was signing. I said yes. My grandson smiled at me. I signed. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and old paper, the kind of smell that's supposed to make you feel like important decisions are being made, like you're in good hands. My grandson, my oldest grandson, the one who'd just graduated college, sat next to me in one of those high-backed chairs that made me feel even smaller than usual. He kept checking his phone, but every time I looked at him, he'd put it away and smile. "This is great, Grandma. Dad's going to be so relieved that you're taking care of this. The lawyer was a man in his 50s with a kind face and reading glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He went through the document, page by page, explaining terms I didn't fully understand. Fiduciary duty, limited scope, authority to act on my behalf. It all sounded so official, so serious. But my grandson kept nodding along like this was perfectly normal, perfectly fine. "Do you have any questions, Mrs. Henderson?" the lawyer asked. I looked at my grandson. He was watching me with this expectant expression, like a puppy waiting for approval. How could I question this? How could I suggest that my own son, my own flesh and blood, might need to be restricted or monitored? What kind of mother doesn't trust her children? "No," I said. "No questions." I signed on the line. My grandson squeezed my hand and told me I was doing the right thing. The lawyer notarized the document, made copies, slid the original into a manila folder. Just like that, I'd given away a piece of my autonomy and thanked everyone for the privilege. 3 months later, they suggested selling the beach house. Too much maintenance, they said. Too much responsibility for someone my age. The market was good right now. We could get a great price, invest the money, make sure I was comfortable for the rest of my life. Wouldn't that be better than worrying about a house I never used anymore? We were at Sunday dinner when they brought it up. My daughter-in-law had made her signature pot roast, or rather, she'd reheated the pot roast I'd made and brought over, but everyone pretended it was hers. She served it on the china I'd given them for their wedding, plates that had been in my family for 3 generations. "Mom," my son said, cutting his meat with precise, careful movements. "We've been thinking about the beach house." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "What about it?" My daughter-in-law jumped in, her voice warm and reasonable. "Well, you haven't been there in almost a year, and the maintenance costs are really adding up. The property taxes alone are nearly $12,000 a year now. When was the last time you even thought about going down there?" "I think about it all the time," I said quietly. "But do you actually go?" my son asked. "Mom, be honest. It's a 4-hour drive. You don't like driving that far anymore, and the house is just sitting there, empty, while we pour money into keeping it up." "Your father and I—" "Dad's gone, Mom." My son's voice was gentle, but it cut deep. "He's been gone 3 years. Holding on to that house isn't going to bring him back." The table went quiet. My grandchildren were staring at their plates. My daughter looked uncomfortable, like she wanted to be anywhere else. And my daughter-in-law was watching me with this calculated sympathy that made my skin crawl. I said no. That was the one thing I held on to, the one boundary I tried to keep. That house was the last piece of my husband I had left. We'd bought it 30 years ago, spent every summer there, scattered his ashes off the back deck. I told them no. But the thing about manipulation is, the answer doesn't matter when someone's already decided for you. Looking back now, I can see how they just went ahead with their plan anyway. But at the time, all I saw was a family trying to help a confused old woman who couldn't quite get her thoughts straight anymore. If you've ever been made to feel like you're losing your mind, you know what I'm talking about. If you've ever had someone tell you that your memories are wrong, that your feelings don't match reality, that you're the problem, you understand how it feels to slowly disappear into doubt. It's like drowning in slow motion, where you can still breathe, but you're not quite sure if you're above water or below it. They were patient. I'll give them that. They played the long game. Every family dinner, every phone call, every visit was another brick in the wall they were building around me. Another moment where they made me feel small, confused, grateful for their tolerance. My dignity eroded so gradually I didn't notice it was gone until there was nothing left but this hollow gratitude for being allowed to exist in their presence. I stopped offering opinions because they'd dismiss them anyway. I stopped making plans because they'd change them. I stopped cooking for family dinners because my daughter-in-law would remake everything, saying she was just helping make sure it was done right. I smiled through it all, apologized for taking up space, thanked them for their patience with me. My friends from childhood, the ones still living in my old neighborhood, stopped calling as much. Not because they didn't care, but because I'd canceled on them so many times. My family needs me, I'd say. My family has plans. My family, my family, my family. Until there was no me left, just this grateful shadow who existed to make their lives easier. The quilts I made for my grandchildren went unnoticed. The sweet tea I kept in the refrigerator went undrunk. The apartment above the closed storefront felt more like a waiting room than a home, a place where I existed between the moments when my family needed something from me. And through it all, I blamed myself. Told myself I was lucky to have family who cared enough to put up with a forgetful old woman. Told myself that this was just what aging looked like, this slow surrender of self. Told myself that the pit of wrongness in my stomach was just anxiety, just paranoia, just me being dramatic. Until the text message, the one that wasn't meant for me, the one that shattered everything. I remember exactly where I was standing when it came through. By the window in my lavender nightgown, my pill organizer in one hand and my phone in the other. The spring breeze coming through the window, carrying the smell of magnolias and fresh-cut grass. The church bells from down the street ringing noon. And then that buzz, that little notification from my daughter-in-law. Your mom still doesn't know we got 840 Kers for the beach house. Closing was last month. She actually asked when the wedding was. 3 laughing emojis. I read it once. Then again. Then 3 more times, my hands starting to shake so badly the phone almost slipped from my fingers. The beach house, sold, last month, $840,000. A wedding that didn't exist. They'd told me they were saving for my grandson's wedding. That's why I'd asked when it was, when the big day would be. I'd been so happy for him, so touched that they'd let me help somehow. And they'd laughed at me, called me their ATM without me even knowing I'd been robbed. I stood there by that window for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The world tilted sideways, and I had to sit down on the floor, my back against the wall, the phone still glowing in my hands. My husband's house. Our house. The place where we'd built a life, where we'd loved each other, where I'd said goodbye to him. Gone. Sold without my permission, without my knowledge, without even the basic respect of telling me the truth. I could see it all so clearly in my mind. The wraparound porch where we'd watched sunsets every evening, cocktails in hand. The master bedroom with the windows that faced the ocean, where we'd lie in bed listening to the waves. The kitchen where I'd made breakfast for my children and grandchildren during those long summer visits, pancakes and bacon and fresh fruit from the farmer's market down the road. The deck where we scattered his ashes. I'd stood there at dawn, just me and the hospice chaplain who'd stayed with us through those final days. The wind had been gentle that morning, carrying him out over the water he'd loved so much. I'd said goodbye to him there, promised him I'd take care of our place, keep it in the family, make sure our grandchildren knew it as the sanctuary it had always been for us. And they'd sold it, laughed about it, used me as a punchline in a joke I hadn't even known I was part of. That was my sacred line. The one thing I couldn't forgive, couldn't rationalize away, couldn't blame myself for. They could have asked me for money. They could have told me they needed help. But they stole the last piece of him I had left. They laughed about it. And they planned to keep laughing, keep pretending, keep me in the dark until I died, and they could split whatever was left of me. Something broke open in my chest then. Not my heart, but something harder. Something that had been holding me together in the shape they wanted. It shattered, and underneath it was rage, pure, clean, focused rage. I wasn't confused. I wasn't losing my mind. I'd been robbed, and they'd made me thank them for it. I called a number I found in the phone book. I don't know why I still have a phone book, but I do. And I flipped through it with shaking hands until I found estate lawyers. The first 3 wouldn't take my call, said I needed an appointment. But the 4th one, Patricia Wilson, she listened to me cry into the phone for 10 minutes and then said something I'll never forget. She said, "Mrs. Henderson, you've been defrauded, and we're going to fix this." Not maybe, Not "we'll see," not "are you sure you remember correctly," just "we're going to fix this." I drove to her office that same day, still in my lavender nightgown under my coat because I couldn't bring myself to change. Patricia was younger than me, probably in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen this story before. She didn't treat me like I was confused. She didn't speak slowly, or pat my hand, or make me repeat myself. She just listened, took notes, and then asked to see every document I'd ever signed. Her office was nothing like the lawyer my grandson had taken me to. No leather chairs or mahogany desks. Just a practical space with filing cabinets and a desk covered in case files. There was a photo on her desk of 2 women and a dog, all 3 of them smiling at the camera. Later, I'd learned that was Patricia and her wife, and that they'd met when Patricia represented her wife's mother in an elder abuse case 20 years ago. "Mrs. Henderson," she said, and her voice was firm but kind. "I need you to understand something. What you're describing isn't forgetfulness. It's not normal family dynamics. This is a pattern of financial exploitation and probably emotional abuse as well. And it's not your fault." I started crying then. Real ugly crying that made my whole body shake. She pushed a box of tissues across the desk and waited, didn't try to comfort me or hurry me along. Just waited until I could breathe again. "I need to know," I said when I could finally speak. "Am I crazy? Did I actually agree to sell the house and just forget? Because they've made me feel so confused about what's real and what isn't." "You're not crazy," Patricia said, and the certainty in her voice was like a lifeline. "You're being gaslit. It's a form of psychological manipulation where someone makes you doubt your own memory and perception of reality. And it's one of the most common tactics in elder financial abuse cases." She slid a legal pad across the desk to me. "I want you to write down everything you remember, every conversation about the beach house, every time they made you feel confused or incompetent, every document you remember signing and what you were told it was for. Don't worry if it's not in order or if you're not sure about the details. Just write what you remember." I filled 7 pages, front and back. My hand cramped by the end, but I kept writing. Getting it all out felt like lancing an infected wound, painful, but necessary. I didn't have most of them. My son had them all, he said. For safekeeping. Of course he did. But I had copies of some things. The power of attorney, some bank statements, and I had that text message which Patricia photographed with her own phone like it was evidence at a crime scene. Because it was. Within 2 days, she'd recommended a forensic accountant who specialized in elder financial abuse. His name was Marcus, and he looked like somebody's grandson, young and earnest with kind eyes. But when he started talking about paper trails and document authentication and fraud markers, I realized he knew exactly what he was doing. He showed up at Patricia's office with a laptop and 2 large accordion folders already filled with preliminary research. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, shaking my hand with both of his, "I've already pulled some public records. The deed transfer on your beach house, it was filed 6 weeks ago, and the signature on file doesn't match the signature on your driver's license or the power of attorney documents." He opened his laptop and showed me side-by-side images. My real signature, the one I'd been signing for 75 years, had a distinctive loop on the H and a slight backward slant. The signature on the deed transfer was close, but the H was different, straighter, like someone had practiced it but couldn't quite get the muscle memory right. "That's not my signature," I whispered. "No, ma'am, it's not," Marcus said, "and that's going to be crucial evidence, but I need your permission to dig deeper. To pull bank records, credit card statements, any financial documents connected to you or your family. Some of it might be uncomfortable to see. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my daughter-in-law's yoga classes, my son's new car, the expensive restaurants where they posted photos on social media while telling me they were too busy to visit, the designer handbags and exotic vacations and remodeled kitchen in a house I'd helped them buy. "I'm prepared," I said. It took him 2 weeks to trace everything, 2 weeks of going through years of documents, bank records, property transfers, signatures that didn't quite match. 2 weeks of me sitting in Patricia's office, drinking terrible coffee and watching my entire life get dissected by strangers who believed me. The power of attorney I'd signed was for taxes only. Limited scope. It explicitly did not include the authority to sell property. The deed transfer on the beach house had a signature that looked like mine, but wasn't quite right. The closing documents had been handled by a lawyer I'd never met, never spoke to, never authorized. My daughter-in-law had somehow gotten access to accounts she had no legal right to touch, probably by claiming she was helping me manage things with my son's power of attorney as backup proof. It was all there. Every forged signature, every illegal transfer, every lie. A pattern of theft and conspiracy that had been building for at least 3 years, probably longer. They'd planned this, coordinated it. My son, my daughter-in-law, even my other daughter who'd witnessed documents and claimed I'd been competent and willing. They'd built a fortress of paperwork around their crime, thinking I was too old and confused to fight back. Marcus sat across from me in Patricia's office and said the words that made it real. "Mrs. Henderson, this is criminal fraud. Multiple counts. We have everything we need." I should have felt victorious, should have felt relieved. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired and old and so angry that this was my life now, that the people I'd raised, the family I'd built, had decided I was worth more to them in pieces than whole. But tired or not, I wasn't done. Patricia asked me what I wanted. "Full restitution," she said. "Criminal charges. Civil suit. We could pursue all of it. But first, we needed to confront them. Make them understand that I knew. That I wasn't the confused old woman they thought I was anymore. I thought about all the ways to do it. A lawyer's letter, a phone call, showing up at their door with police. But none of that felt right. They'd humiliated me in private, made me feel small in the quiet moments when no one was watching. I wanted them to feel that same exposure, that same shock of having your reality ripped away. My grandson's birthday was coming up. Big family dinner. They'd invited me, of course. Expected me to show up grateful and clueless, probably ready to write a check for a gift I couldn't afford. They had no idea I knew. No idea that the confused old lady act was over. Patricia advised against it. Said confrontation could be dangerous, that I should let the lawyers handle everything. But I needed this. Needed to look them in the eyes and watch the truth land. Needed them to know that I knew, that I'd always known something was wrong, that their mother wasn't as stupid as they'd convinced themselves she was. So I told Patricia I was going, and that I wanted her to come with me, along with a process server if she could arrange it. She could. The days leading up to that dinner felt like holding my breath underwater. I went through my normal routine, took my pills from the plastic organizer with the days of the week, made sweet tea that nobody drank, sat in the back pew of my church and prayed for strength, for clarity, for the courage to do what needed to be done. My cross necklace felt heavier than usual, like it was anchoring me to something bigger than my fear. Patricia called me every day during that week, not to discuss the case, but just to check in, to make sure I wasn't losing my nerve. She'd been through this before, she told me. Seen dozens of families implode when the truth came out. Seen adult children who'd convinced themselves that they were entitled to their parents' money, that they were just taking what would be theirs eventually anyway. Some of them will try to apologize, she warned me. They'll cry, they'll beg, they'll promise to pay it all back if you just don't pursue charges. Don't listen. People who exploit vulnerable family members don't change. They just get better at hiding it. I thought about that a lot. About whether my son was truly sorry for what he'd done, or just sorry he'd been caught. About whether my daughter-in-law had any capacity for genuine remorse, or if it was all just another performance. The night before the dinner, I couldn't sleep. I kept rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd stand, where I'd look. Patricia had advised me to stay calm, to let the documents speak for themselves, but I wanted them to see my face, wanted them to understand that the confused old woman they'd been manipulating was gone. replaced by someone who knew exactly what they'd done and wasn't afraid to name it. I picked out my best outfit. Not the lavender nightgown, not the comfortable clothes I usually wore to family dinners. Something sharp, something that said I knew exactly what I was doing. I even borrowed Patricia's Range Rover for the drive over, that beautiful British racing green that made me feel like somebody who couldn't be pushed around. We arrived 15 minutes late. Fashionably late, Patricia called it. Power move late. The process server was in a separate car, waiting for the signal. I walked up to my son's door with Patricia beside me, my hands steady for the first time in months. The dinner party noise floated through the windows. Laughter, music, my family, celebrating without knowing their world was about to end. I rang the doorbell. The sound echoed through their foyer, that grand entrance with the marble floors and the chandelier that cost more than some people's cars. I could hear music playing inside, laughter, the clink of glasses, a celebration. They were celebrating while I'd been sitting in my apartment wondering if I was losing my mind. My daughter-in-law answered. She was wearing something expensive, something I probably paid for with money I didn't know I'd given. A silk blouse and cream, designer jeans that fit perfectly, jewelry that caught the light. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled in those effortless waves that actually take an hour to achieve. She looked like success, like someone who had it all figured out. Her smile was bright and fake, and it died the second she saw Patricia standing next to me. "Mom," she said, and I heard the calculation in her voice. "Who's this?" "My lawyer," I said. "Can we come in?" I watched the color drain from her face, watched her try to recover, to smile again, to act confused. "Your lawyer? Mom? What are you talking about? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, and pushed past her into the house. The dinner party froze. My son stood up from the table. My daughter was there with her husband. My grandchildren, the older ones who should have known better, were scattered around the living room. Everyone staring at me like I'd grown a second head. The dining room looked like a magazine spread, candles flickering in crystal holders, wine glasses catching the light, a beautiful roasted chicken on the platter I'd given them for Christmas 3 years ago, place settings that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Everything perfect, everything controlled, everything designed to show the world that this was a family that had it all together. "Mom, what's going on?" my son asked, and he sounded so reasonable, so concerned. The same tone he'd used when he convinced me to sign over power of attorney. The same tone he'd used for years to make me doubt myself. I saw him calculate in real time, saw his eyes flick from me to Patricia to the briefcase in her hand, saw him try on different expressions, confusion, worry, innocent concern, like he was shuffling through masks to find the right one for this situation. "What's going on?" I said, and my voice was steady, cold, nothing like the grateful trembling they were used to hearing. "Is that I know about the beach house. I know you sold it without my permission. I know you forged documents and stole $840,000 from me. I know everything." The room went so quiet, I could hear my grandson's video game in the other room. Everyone frozen, everyone calculating. My daughter-in-law's face went from white to red, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. My son took a step toward me, his hands up in that placating gesture I knew so well. "Mom, you're confused. We talked about this. You signed everything. We went over it all." "I signed a limited power of attorney for taxes," I said. "Not for selling property. Not for anything else. You forged my signature on the deed transfer. You committed fraud. Multiple counts." Patricia stepped forward then, her briefcase open, papers in hand. "Mr. Henderson, I'm Patricia Wilson, your mother's attorney. We have documentation showing systematic financial exploitation over a period of at least 3 years. We have proof of forged signatures, unauthorized transactions, and conspiracy to defraud a vulnerable adult. You'll be receiving official notice of a civil suit, and we're prepared to pursue criminal charges." And that's when I signaled to the window. The process server came up the walk, knocked on the door. I watched my daughter-in-law's hands shake as she took the papers. watched her eyes scan the first page, seeing the words fraud and criminal charges and restitution in bold legal text. She looked up at me, and for just a second, the mask dropped completely. I saw rage there, pure, undiluted fury that I dared to fight back, that I dared to be anything other than the grateful victim they'd needed me to be. Then my son. He didn't shake, just took the papers with a careful, controlled motion that told me he'd been expecting this on some level. Maybe not today, maybe not this dramatically, but somewhere in the back of his mind, he'd known this day might come. Then my daughter, whose face went absolutely gray. "Mom, I didn't know," she started, but Patricia cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Mrs. Henderson's daughter," Patricia said, reading from her notes. "You witnessed and notarized 3 separate documents related to property transfers and financial accounts. You certified that your mother was of sound mind and acting of her own free will. Either you were complicit in the fraud, or you were criminally negligent in your duties as a notary. Either way, you're being served." My daughter started crying. My son-in-law put his arm around her. Shooting me a look of such hatred, I actually took a step back. One of my grandchildren, the youngest one, only 14, ran out of the room crying. Another pulled out their phone and started recording. "You can't do this," my daughter-in-law said, and her voice was shaking now, that perfect mask cracking down the middle. "You're confused. You don't understand what you're doing. You need help." "What I need," I said, and these words felt like hot metal in my throat, like something I'd been swallowing for years finally burning its way out, "is for you to understand that I am not confused. I am not losing my mind. I was robbed by people I trusted, people I raised, people who decided I was worth more in pieces than whole, and I will spend every dollar and every day I have left making sure you face consequences for what you did." My son tried one more time, reached for my arm, used that soft voice, that patronizing tone. "Mom, please, we can talk about this. We were trying to help you. You weren't capable of managing everything anymore. We were protecting you." I pulled my arm away, looked him in the eyes. My son, my baby boy, the child I'd nursed and raised and sacrificed for, and said the words I never thought I'd say. "You're not my son anymore. You're a thief who targeted his own mother, and I will never forgive you for what you took from me." The silence after that was different. Absolute. Final. My grandchildren were crying. My daughter was trying to explain, to minimize, to say she didn't know. She just signed what they asked her to sign. My daughter-in-law was threatening me, saying I'd regret this, saying she'd make sure everyone knew I was senile and vindictive and crazy. I didn't care. I just turned around and walked out. Patricia followed. We got in that green Range Rover and drove away, and I didn't look back once. The lawsuits took months. The criminal investigation took longer. But Marcus had been thorough, and Patricia was relentless. My son called me 3 days after being served. I almost didn't answer, but Patricia was sitting in my living room and nodded for me to pick up. She'd anticipated this, had her own phone ready to record in case he said anything incriminating. "Mom," he said, and his voice cracked. "Mom, please, we can fix this. I'll give you the money back, all of it. Just drop the charges, please. Think about what this is doing to the family." "What family?" I asked. The words came out colder than I'd intended, but I meant them. The family that stole from me? The family that laughed about it? The family that made me think I was losing my mind so they could rob me more easily? It wasn't like that. We were going to tell you. We were going to invest it for you, make sure you were taken care of. By selling my husband's house without my permission, by forging my signature, by lying to my face for months. My voice rose, despite my best efforts to stay calm. You didn't take care of me. You stole from me, and you did it knowing exactly what you were doing. Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm your son." "You were my son," I said. "Now you're just someone who committed a crime and got caught." I hung up. Patricia squeezed my shoulder. I didn't cry until she left. My son tried to settle, tried to give me part of the money back in exchange for dropping charges. I refused. My daughter-in-law tried to claim I'd been incompetent when I signed the power of attorney. The forensic evidence proved otherwise. Marcus had found timestamps on emails, text messages discussing their plans, bank records showing systematic draining of accounts I'd thought were secure. A paper trail so clear that even their own lawyer advised them to plead guilty and hope for leniency. In the end, they lost everything. Not just the money, which they had to return with interest, but their reputations, their relationships. My other children, the ones who hadn't been involved, cut them off completely. My grandchildren, the ones old enough to understand, stopped speaking to them. The extended family picked sides, and most of them picked mine. My daughter-in-law's yoga friends found out. My son's business partners found out. The people in their neighborhood found out. Elder financial abuse isn't just a civil matter in Georgia. It's a crime. They were convicted. They served time. Not much, the system being what it is. But enough. Enough for everyone to know what they'd done. I got my money back. Not the beach house, that was gone, sold to people who had nothing to do with my family's crimes. But the money, plus damages, plus legal fees. Enough to start over. Enough to prove I wasn't the confused old woman they'd needed me to be. But the money wasn't the victory. The victory was the moment when my daughter-in-law realized I'd known all along. That I'd let her think she'd won just long enough to build an airtight case against her. The victory was watching my son understand that his mother wasn't a fool, wasn't weak, wasn't going to disappear quietly to make his life easier. The victory was taking my life back. I moved out of that apartment above the closed storefront. Found a small house in my old neighborhood, the one where I still have friends from childhood. Real friends who never made me feel small. Women who understand what it means to reclaim yourself after someone tries to erase you. The house has a front porch with a swing, a small yard with a garden bed I'm planning to fill with tomatoes and herbs come spring. 2 bedrooms, though I only need 1. The second is becoming my quilting room, a space entirely my own where I can spread out my fabrics and patterns without worrying about being in someone's way. My friend Dorothy helped me move in. She's 82 and insisted on carrying boxes anyway, telling me that her doctor said she needed more exercise and this was better than walking on a treadmill. We unpacked my quilts first, draping them over furniture until the house looked lived in and loved. She made sweet tea in my old plastic pitcher and we sat on the porch swing, drinking it and watching the neighborhood cats patrol their territory. "You did good, Helen," she said. "Not many people have the strength to fight back like you did." I didn't feel strong, I admitted. I felt terrified the whole time. "That's what makes it brave," she said, "doing it even when you're scared." We have coffee on Thursdays now. We quilt together on weekends. I'm designing my own patterns now instead of following the ones my mother taught me. Each stitch feels like taking back a piece of myself. Each finished quilt is proof that I'm still here, still creating, still valuable beyond what I can provide to ungrateful children. I made one for myself, the first quilt I've ever kept. It's on my bed, and some mornings I wake up and touch it just to remember that I'm allowed to have beautiful things, that I'm allowed to matter. I changed the locks on my front door. It's such a small thing, such an obvious thing. But the first time I stood there with that new key in my hand, knowing I was the only one who could open that door, I cried. Real tears, not the quiet, defeated crying I'd done in that apartment. These were different. These were relief and rage and grief all mixed together, the kind of tears that wash something clean. Nobody has a key but me. Nobody can walk in uninvited. Nobody can take anything from me without my permission. That simple act, turning that lock and hearing it click into place, means more than any beach house ever could. I drive sometimes, not the Range Rover. I couldn't quite justify buying one at 75, even with the settlement money. But I have a nice car now, one I picked out myself without anyone telling me it was too much or too impractical. I drive to the old neighborhood, park on streets I knew as a child, walk past houses where friends I grew up with still live. Sometimes I let myself imagine what would have happened if I'd moved back here years ago, if I'd trusted my instincts when they first started telling me something was wrong. But regret is a waste of energy. I learned that. You can't get back the time you lost to people who didn't deserve it. You can only decide what to do with the time you have left. My plastic pill organizer still has the days of the week on it. I still take my medications every morning, but I don't panic anymore when I forget what day it is. My memory isn't perfect. Nobody's is at 75. But I'm not confused. I'm not incompetent. I'm just old, and that's not the same thing. I still wear my cross necklace. Still go to church on Sundays, sitting in that back pew where I can watch everyone else and feel the holy silence wrap around me. I pray differently now, not asking God to help me understand why I deserve to be treated that way, asking Him to help me forgive myself for believing I did. Some days are harder than others. Some days I think about my son, about the little boy he used to be before he became the kind of man who steals from his mother. Some days I miss my grandchildren, even the ones who knew what was happening and didn't say anything. Some days I pour sweet tea into my plastic pitcher and cry because I used to make it for a family that doesn't exist anymore. But most days, I'm okay. Better than okay. I'm building something new, something that's just mine. A life that doesn't require me to make myself small or grateful or easy to manage. A life where I matter because I'm alive, not because of what I can provide. I've started taking classes at the community center, watercolor painting. The teacher is younger than my children, but she treats me like I have something valuable to say, like my perspective matters. I'm not very good yet, but I'm learning. The class meets on Tuesday afternoons in a room with big windows that let in the southern light. There are 8 of us, mostly women my age, though there's one young man who's recovering from a hand injury and using art as physical therapy. The teacher, Melissa, is patient and encouraging. She doesn't hover or correct us constantly. She lets us make mistakes, lets us find our own way into the work. My first painting was of the beach house, the one I lost. I worked from memory, trying to capture the way the light hit the windows at sunset, the deep blue of the ocean beyond the deck, the weathered gray of the wooden siding. It's not accurate. My memory isn't perfect, and my skills are still developing. The perspective is off, and the colors aren't quite right. But it's mine. My interpretation, my memorial to something I loved and lost. I hung it in my living room, above the fireplace where it's the first thing I see when I come home. And sometimes I look at it and feel sad. But mostly, I feel grateful. Grateful that I escaped. Grateful that I fought back. Grateful that I'm still here to paint and quilt and drink sweet tea on my own terms. The statistics haunt me sometimes. Studies show that 1 in 10 seniors experiences some form of abuse every year. 1 in 10. That means there are thousands of women like me, maybe hundreds of thousands, sitting in their apartments or their houses or their assisted living facilities, being slowly erased by the people who are supposed to love them. Financial exploitation is the most common form because it's the easiest to hide, the easiest to justify as helping or managing someone who can't do it themselves. And here's what keeps me up at night. Research shows that 32% of teenagers suffered physical abuse. A third of children growing up learning that exploiting vulnerable people is normal, that violence is acceptable, that the people who depend on you are there to be used. My son wasn't born knowing how to manipulate me. He learned it somewhere. Maybe from his father, who I'd always thought of as a good man, but who knows what I didn't see. Maybe from our culture that teaches children that elderly people are burdens. Maybe from me, for letting it happen the first 100 times before I finally said no. The cycle continues unless we break it. That's what I want people to understand. If you're reading this, if you're listening to my story, I need you to know that what happened to me can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how careful, how much you trust your family. Financial abuse happens in the quietest ways, in the most loving voices, in the gentle suggestions that become demands that become theft. So here's what I wish I'd known. Here's what I want to tell every person who's starting to feel like they're losing their grip on their own life. Never sign anything without your own lawyer present. Not your son's lawyer, not your daughter's friend who happens to practice law. Your own lawyer who works for you and only you. Never give anyone power of attorney without understanding exactly what it means. Limited scope, specific purposes, and make sure you have copies of everything. Keep them somewhere your family can't access. A safe deposit box at a bank they don't use. A trusted friend's house, somewhere. Check your accounts regularly, every week. Look at every transaction. If something seems wrong, it probably is. Trust that instinct. You're not paranoid. You're protecting yourself. Talk to someone outside your family, a friend, a neighbor, a professional. Tell them what's happening. Let them be a reality check when your children start telling you that you're confused, that you don't remember things correctly, that you need help managing your life. And if you're already in it, if you're already being isolated and manipulated and made to feel small, it's not too late. It's never too late. I was 75 and I fought back. I won. You can too. Document everything. Keep records. Get your own copies of documents. Find a lawyer who specializes in elder law. Build your case quietly, carefully, and then strike when they least expect it. Don't warn them. Don't give them time to hide assets or destroy evidence. Just do it. You are not a burden. You are not too old to matter. You are not confused just because you're aging. Your memory might not be perfect. Your body might not work the way it used to. But that doesn't mean you deserve to be robbed by the people who are supposed to love you. I'm 75 years old. I live in a small house in the neighborhood where I grew up. I quilt and paint and drink sweet tea whenever I want. I have friends who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. I have peace, real peace, the kind that comes from knowing you fought for yourself when it mattered most. My daughter-in-law tried to contact me last month, email because I blocked her number. She wanted to apologize, she said, wanted to explain, wanted me to understand that she never meant to hurt me, that things just got out of hand, that if I could just find it in my heart to forgive her, then maybe we could rebuild our relationship. I deleted it without responding. Some things can't be rebuilt. Some betrayals are too deep. She didn't steal money from me. She stole my trust in my own mind. She made me doubt my memories, my instincts, my worth as a human being. She took my husband's last gift to me and laughed about it. There's no coming back from that. My son hasn't contacted me at all. I don't know if that's better or worse. Sometimes I imagine what I'd say to him if he did reach out. Sometimes I imagine him showing up at my door, asking for forgiveness. But mostly, I just don't think about him. He made his choice. I made mine. We're strangers now who happen to share DNA. The grandchildren are harder. The young ones didn't understand what was happening. The older ones did, but they were caught in the middle. A few of them have reached out, carefully, testing to see if I'm still the grandmother they remember, or if I've become this bitter old woman who destroyed their family over money. I try to be honest with them. I tell them it was never about the money. Tell them about the beach house, about their grandfather, about what it meant to lose that. Tell them about sitting in my apartment feeling like I was going crazy because their parents were systematically erasing my reality. Tell them that families are supposed to protect each other, not prey on each other. Some of them get it, some of them don't. That's okay. They're young. They'll understand better when they're older, when they have something precious that someone tries to take from them, when they have to choose between being easy to love and being true to themselves. Spring is coming around again. Another year of windows opening, of magnolias blooming, of life starting over. I'm working on a new quilt, something abstract and wild that doesn't follow any pattern at all. I'm thinking about painting my front door red, just because I can. Just because it's my door and I get to decide. Sometimes I drive past my old apartment, the one above the closed storefront. There's a new tenant now. I wonder if they know what happened there, if the walls still remember the sound of me crying, or if that all faded when I left. I don't stop. I don't need to. That place was never home. It was just where I waited to become myself again. The real home is here, in this small house in my old neighborhood, in the quilts I make and the paintings I attempt and the sweet tea I drink on my front porch, in the friends who stop by without calling first because they know I want them there, in the lock on my door that only I control. I asked when the wedding was. My daughter-in-law smiled and said she'd sold my beach house to pay for it. And in that moment, in that terrible moment of understanding what had been done to me, something died. But something else was born too. Something stronger. Something that refused to disappear quietly. I'm 75 years old. I'm sitting in my own house, in my own neighborhood, living my own life. I survived people who tried to erase me. I fought back and I won. And if you're listening to this, if you're in a situation that feels wrong but you can't quite name it, if you're being made to feel like you're the problem when your instincts are screaming that something's not right, listen to me. You're not confused. You're not too sensitive. You're not imagining things. Trust yourself. Fight back. Get help. Do it before you lose more than you can afford to lose. Because here's what I learned. Growing old doesn't mean growing small. It doesn't mean accepting humiliation or surrendering dignity. It means knowing your worth and protecting what's yours. It means understanding that you still matter, that your life still has value, that you deserve better than what people are willing to give you. It means sitting in the back pew of an empty church after everyone has left and deciding that you're not done fighting. Not yet. Not ever. So where are you listening from? What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself? If this story resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, share it. Like it. Subscribe for more stories like this. Because somewhere out there is another woman sitting in her apartment holding a text message that's about to change her life. And she needs to know she's not alone. She needs to know she can fight back. She needs to know she can win.